of course, immigrants have been coming to Europe since the 60s. At first were immigrants from southern European societies, Italians, Greeks, Spaniards. They were easily incorporated, and most of them went back to their countries. Turks were the first non-Europeans that came and stayed. When I was a student in Austria and in Germany in the late 60s, and I used to work in factories with Turkish immigrants, and there were no Muslims in Germany. They were all Turks. Today they are not Turks, they are only Muslims. And so how both they are viewed by Germans as Muslims, not as Turks, and they themselves view themselves as Muslims, and means part of a global Muslim ummah, not only as part of the Turkish nation. So this exemplifies how a process of globalization has developed a form of identity, because before it's how Turks can become Germans. Now the question is, can Muslims be European? Because Europeans were secular, there is no, the only growth of religion in Europe is that of immigrant communities. And of course, it's very different whether it is mainly Turks in Germany, which are the majority of immigrants, whether it is mainly North African, let's say from the Maghreb in France, or whether it is basically from the previous British Empire, from all over, from the Caribbean to Africa to Southeast Asia and South Asia in England, which is much more very type of immigration. But everywhere, the real issue is Islam in Europe. And of course, the interesting question is that secular Europe suddenly finds themselves Christian, not because they are believers again, but because their cultural identity, as long as they define as Islam as non-European, it means that then they cannot be like us because they are not Christian or they are not secular, which is interesting because there was a time when they said Turkey can join us because it's secular Turkey. Well, cannot join us yet because they have not yet the rights, the constitution, the democratic practices, they are not developed, but they are already secular, so they could join us. Now the paradox is the more democratic Turkey becomes, and the more it meets all the conditions to join the European Union, they change the constitution, they change all their laws, the more Islamic, Muslim their politics become. So the more democratic Turkey becomes, the more Muslim. And now, European, no, they cannot join us, but we met all the, you told us you have to become like that, but you didn't have to become Muslim. Why not? You had Christian democratic parties. Were not the Christian democratic parties the one that established the European Union? The Treaty of Rome was established by Christian democratic parties and basically benedicted by the Pope. I mean, it was all the ruling parties in 5 countries were Christian democratic, and only in France they were not rulers, but they were the leader French politicians of the European Union were all Christian Democrats, the main figures. But we have forgotten this story. And now, of course, we are saying, well, you have to be either Christian or secular. You cannot be Islam. You cannot be Muslim. Muslim democracy is not possible. What do you mean? Christian democracy was possible. So again, it's our confused categories within Europe, and this is a very interesting debate. Do they have to become like us, and how? Like us, meaning they have to become Christian or secular. This is what I said about Denmark. To become it's interesting that the most secular European countries today are becoming much more anti-immigrant than the other. I mean, Denmark and Holland was the kind of the model of toleration historically. It tolerated the Jews, they were expelled from Spain. It tolerated the Puritans, expelled from England. It tolerated the libertine from the Enlightenment. And they didn't have to become Dutch. But now, and they had pillars. They had Protestants, Catholics, and secular, the 3 pillars. Now the pillars have disappeared. They try to establish a Muslim pillar, but the Muslim pillar only works if there are other pillars. Now the Dutch have become so tolerant, so liberal, that they cannot tolerate those who are not as liberal and as tolerant as they are. What means that it's a very strange form of toleration. So, no, it's a serious matter, because it's really, it's a quandary that Europeans themselves realized. We thought we were secular. We thought that we had neutral secular states that could accumulate diversity, but we realized no, our states were not neutral. Of course they were secular Christian, and secularity and Christianity was almost the same thing. We were secularized Christians, or Christianized seculars, whatever you want to call it. And of course non-Westerners always view it the so-called secularity is Christianity, of course, because they realize that secularity is not this neutral space that somehow accommodates, but secularity is a very, very Christian phenomenon, the way it has developed. There is a famous anecdote in Northern Ireland. You pass from a Protestant to a Catholic zone. Hands up, Protestant or Catholic? No, I'm an atheist, but which one? A Catholic or, the same thing. There are no such a thing as a secular. It's not the thing that remains when you get rid of religion. You are a Lutheran secular, a Catholic secular, a Confucian secular, a Hindu secular, a Buddhist secular, and that's to a certain extent